Hi, this is Suchya Datta here once again, your SST teacher, starting with Chapter 2, Class 10 History. The chapter is the Nationalist Movement in Indo-China. Class 10th History talks a lot about the nationalist movements in various countries during that age. Now, why did nationalism spread so much and why were the colonies made at that time? Simply, industrialization had started, and due to industrialization, we saw that in Europe there was requirement of raw material and there was a need of a ready market wherein they could sell their goods. And Asia and Africa and some other parts of the world were the best places from where they could get both the raw material as well as the market to sell their goods. Therefore, when they captured a particular country, they made it their colony, they actually exploited it. When they exploited the political, economic, social conditions of that country, that is the time that the people actually started raising their voice. They started speaking against the colonial rule. They even took up to arms, and that was actually the nationalist movement in various countries. Now, before I start with the nationalist movement in Indo-China, I am going to explain you the meaning of the few difficult terms and concepts before I start the chapter. The first is Indo-China. Indo-China is that part of Southeast Asia where in Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam are there. So, three countries, Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam, together make up Indo-China. Next is Maritime Silk Route. This Maritime Silk Route was that route which was in fact a sea route wherein silk was traded. The export and import of silk by sea was Maritime Silk Route. Forced labor. Forced labor in Hindi is called as bigar. That is, when people are forced to work in fields, in plantations or as laborers without getting any money for the job that they are doing is called as forced labor. Next is colony. This term colony is actually the result of the industrialization that happened in Europe. Because when industrialization took place, the countries of Europe wanted to move towards the Asian and the African countries in order to have a hold there, and they started conquering these countries. But remember, in a colony, it was not mere political domination. They exploited them socially, economically, politically, in all aspects. That is, when a country lost its sovereignty, that's the time that a country became a colony of another nation. Next is indentured labor. Indentured labor is a term of plantation agriculture wherein the laborers were contractual, that is, they were kept just for the season and then they were thrown out without any reason. They had no rights, they could not ask why were they thrown out, and they were forced to work for long hours. That was the indentured labor. Next is natives. Natives was a term again by the people who made colonies in various parts of the world for those people who belonged to that particular nation. So, the natural born citizens of a country are in fact the natives of that country. Next is civilizing mission. Civilizing mission. You see, when the European countries started colonizing the countries, they had a guilt. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but they wanted to show it to the world that they were doing something very noble. So they said that actually the Asian and the African countries are backward countries. Therefore, it was the moral duty of the European countries to see that they become civilized. And this civilizing mission, they said, was the reason behind making colonies. But what was the real reason? In fact, it is said that it was the policy of the 3 G's that we call it, that they actually started with making colonies. And the 3 G's are gold. Gold meaning to say, what did they do? They wanted to take or get more money from the colonies, from the countries whom they were exploiting. And then it was God. God, that is, they wanted to please the Christ, and glory. Glory that they in fact brought to their motherland is the theory of the 3 G's. Remember, the theory of 3 G's, that is gold, God and glory, was actually responsible for making colonies. But the way they presented it to the world was by saying that it's a civilizing mission. They were on a noble task of doing what? Of civilizing the countries of Asia and Africa which were uncivilized. And I continue with the new terms in the next clipping. While we are talking of industrialization, there are certain terms which are similar in all the colonies, like forced labor, indentured labor, but there are certain terms which are meant for a particular country or for a particular area. Continuing with this, we talk of the word colon. Colon was actually a French man living in Vietnam. So, a French man living in Vietnam was called as a colon. Now, children, what was an Englishman living in India called as? What was he called as? In fact, it was Angrez. Next is white collar jobs. White collar jobs were actually started with a concept, that is those who did not work in the fields or in the factories, industries, and they were actually in the beginning as clerks. They just sat on the chair and worked. But later on, this term is applied for all the offices job. That's the white collar jobs. Next is bubonic plague. This is a dreadful disease by which there are certain parts of the body of a man which actually swell, and this plague or this disease is caused by the bite of the rat or due to unhygienic conditions. And we will see how in Vietnam did this plague spread and what were the effects of this plague. Next is syncretic tradition. Those traditions and beliefs by which a nation can be united, can be made to feel as one, are syncretic traditions. Next is concentration camps. Concentration camps were those camps wherein the people were actually kept like animals. A very brutal and ruthless treatment was given to them, and they were made to be in the concentration camp as animals is actually a concept which grew out of the colonization which had spread. Next is napalm and Agent Orange. This was a chemical weapon which was used by United States for the first time in Vietnam. Next is domino effect. Now, domino effect is, it was in fact the fear of the United States that what is going to happen if they start actually with communism in Vietnam, or a country actually picks up communism, then other countries would also follow the same example. So, that fear of not spreading communism in a country, for simple reason that this would spread to other countries also, was called as the domino effect. Now I will start with the chapter in the next clipping.